Welcome to another edition of the Jerry Ratcliffe Show podcast, and it's my special pleasure to introduce today's guest, somebody I've had incredible respect for a long time in the business, and I actually covered him. He probably doesn't know this, but before I came to Charlottesville, I covered Jay and the Duke Blue Devils a little bit, and enjoyed watching him play. And in Charlottesville, I came here in '82, and so I continued to watch him play through that era, and then have watched him and admired him as develop as one of the great broadcasters of our time. Welcome, Jay Bilas, ESPN.
Well, Jerry, thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
I guess first of all, Jay, we'll get your thoughts on Saturday's top five showdown between Houston and Virginia, but I'm curious what was going through your mind last Saturday afternoon after watching Houston build that huge lead and then seeing Alabama erase a 15-point lead and come back and dominate the second half.
Well, Alabama's really talented. They're a young team, but they've got a lot of length and athleticism, and they're formidable. So I think it said more about Alabama perhaps than it said positively than it said negatively about Houston. But I think Virginia fans remember just how good Houston is from Virginia's game there last year. Virginia's far better now than they were then, but it'll be a little bit like looking in a mirror defensively. Houston's very physical. They like to double the post, and they'll occasionally trap a ball screen. They're really aggressive, and they're difficult to play against, as is Virginia in a little bit of a different way.
What do you think the key was in that Alabama win? I heard something about Kelvin Sampson talking about Alabama spreading the floor and attacking them, but did you think that was the key to the comeback, or was it something else in your view?
No, that was pretty much it. I talked about on the broadcast. Alabama went small in the second half, and they took out their big guy Charles Bediako and went with a smaller lineup where they were able to open the middle, spread the floor a little bit. And I felt like the game was called much differently in the second half by the officials than in the first. It was called much closer, which made it easier, I think, for Alabama to get into the lane. And I think a lot of people look at Alabama and say they're a three-point shooting team, but what they really are a penetrating team. And that penetration sets up, it draws help, and that sets up their ability to spray it to shooters. And that's where they're most dangerous, is when they can get in the lane. And in the second half, they were much more mindful about getting into the lane and penetrating off the dribble. And usually Houston's pretty good at staying in front and guarding the ball. But when they got spread out a little bit, it made help a little bit longer and put them into rotation, and Alabama took advantage of it.
I liked your comments about Virginia in the preseason on your national, I guess your preseason press conference. When you talked about Virginia being old and experienced, I guess Mike Bray, our good friend Mike Bray, coined that phrase a couple of years ago about teams being old, but obviously that's something that has weighed in Virginia's favor this year.
Yeah, I think in any walk of life, you would rather have experience than not. And I think sometimes it's seen as a negative on younger players. I mean, there have been a lot of teams that have won just as much as experienced teams with younger players. You don't want to turn talent down, but you'd rather have experience and talent. I don't know anybody that's gotten on an airplane and felt good when the pilot says, "Hey, this is my first flight." Or when you have a surgeon, you say, "Yeah, my first operation." You'd rather have experience than not, but it's not dispositive. It's not like experienced teams win every year. They're just more experienced teams than there aren't. But now with the transfer portal, you can get older in a hurry. And I think there are a number of coaches out there that have chosen to take more experienced players to have as quote unquote rookies in their program than have true rookies. That's a lot of teams have had some success doing that. And I think Virginia is one of them.
What do you see as the key to Saturday's matchup? Both very talented teams with were great athletes. Houston obviously is more athletic, but what do you think is going to be the difference Saturday?
Well, I think handling pressure is going to be one. It's going to be a slow game. Virginia does not play at a fast pace, and I think it's very difficult to speed up Virginia. So Houston's going to have to get used to. And it's not like Houston is a high possession team, but they're a higher possession team than Virginia. So the players that play against Virginia have to get used to a slower pace, and that's a disruption of their rhythm from the opening tip. And some players do better than others at adjusting to that. But it's not going to be a game where rhythm's easily established for players or teams. So a lot of this is going to come down to your ability to rebound the ball and take care of it. Virginia has a very good, ratio of turnovers. They force about 13, 14 a game, but they don't even, they turn it over less than 10 times a game. And to have a +4 turnover margin with that low of a possession game is a big deal. And then fouls are going to be an issue. Virginia, their defense doesn't produce a lot of fouls. And I think how the game's called, you're going to have to adjust to it. But keeping Virginia off the free throw line, because I think it's going to be difficult for Houston to get there. Traditionally, that's been the case. So you can't provide Virginia with a free throw advantage.
We were talking to Coach Sampson this morning, and he said Virginia's not a hard team to scout, but they're a hard team to prepare for. Do you think like you said, both teams, it's going to be a slower pace, but do you think it's just the defensive intensity that Virginia brings that makes them so hard to prepare for, or is it the pace?
Well, the pace is number one. It's a lot easier to slow a team down than it is to speed one up, and Virginia plays at a slower pace, and that's the way they play. And I think a lot of teams and players make the mistake that you can speed the game up by taking quicker shots, and that just plays right into Virginia's hands. You have to work against their defense to score, and if you choose to take a quick or a less than a good shot, you're going to be playing time of possession is going to go in Virginia's favor, and you're going to be playing defense most of the game. And they're used to burning the clock. I think their average possession length is right at 20 seconds, and that's depending on how you look at it, at the top or the bottom of Division I. I think that ranks in the 360s in pace of play. So it's just the way they play, and speeding them up is hard to do. You're going to have to the extent you can speed the game, you're going to have to do it on the defensive end, not the offensive end. Because they don't allow a lot of runouts, they don't send a lot of guys to the offensive glass, so they're heavily into taking away your transition as opposed to getting second shots. But I agree with Kelvin that it isn't hard to figure out what Virginia does. It's hard to play against it. And their offense is a read and react offense. It used to be called the blocker mover. Now Tony calls it sides, I think. And and traditionally, as Jaden Gardner transferred into Virginia from East Carolina. He's had great success against Houston. Houston's had a hard time dealing with them, and I think it won't be as many possessions in this game. So it's not like Virginia players are going to put up 30 on you. But, if they get 18 or 20 in a higher possession game, that's the equivalent of 30.
Yeah, Kelvin was saying this morning he's really tired of seeing Jaden Gardner. It's like the 5th or 6th year or something like that. And he said it seems like Kihei's been around for 10 years as well. So other than that experience, Jay, what do you like about this Virginia team?
They score easier. Last year, I thought at the end of the year, last couple of months, they were an NCAA tournament team, but they were dragging that poor non-conference record with them, which hurt them in the committee room. I don't think Virginia at the end of the year was a team you wanted to play against at the beginning of the year. I think a lot of teams would have liked to have scheduled them. But this year, they're a little bit more versatile. Van der Plas gives them another versatile player to plug in that can step out and knock down a three, and he can also operate in the post and guard in the post. So you can play a smaller lineup with him playing kind of a small ball 5. And Ryan Dunn is a really athletic 6'8" player with a long wingspan that can defend. and he can play significant minutes. He's not, I wouldn't call him a scorer just yet, but he can put the ball on the deck and get to the rim and finish plays. And I think there are some areas where they were a little bit deficient last year, like Armin Franklin is a much better, more efficient scorer this year. He's taking better shots, and those that he's taking, he's making at a higher rate. And I don't know whether Reese Beekman's going to play, this day-to-day thing with that hamstring and the other injury, but he's been great. Has really improved his shooting, and his offensive game is much more confident. So he's more of a what I would call a 3-level scorer now, and his defense and his passing are still top level. So they're a much better offensive team this year than last year, and have more areas where they can hurt you. Last year it was just a couple areas, and guys had to play too many minutes. The pace helps them play minutes, and the fact that they don't foul a lot, but having some quality play off the bench gives them the opportunity to rest some guys in key spots. That's important.
Yeah, I agree with your comments about Dunn. That kid's really impressed me, and we found out something about him the other day that you might even be interested in. When Isaac Trout, who's redshirting this year, when they got his commitment, Tony was all of a sudden out of scholarships, and they had to call Ryan Dunn's father and tell him, Mr. Dunn, we're sorry, but we don't have any more room. And it was a tough call to make, but he said the next day that Dunn's father called him back and he said, Tony, would it be okay if Ryan comes next year and pays his own way as a walk-on? Because we really feel like that's the place for him to play college basketball. How rare is that in today's college basketball world for something like that to happen?
Depends on the family. I've heard that type of story before. It just depends on the family and whether they're willing to do it, and willing and able, because you may have willing and not able, and you may have able and not willing. So it just sort of depends on the player and the family. But it's not normal, but it's not unique. It's happened before.
Is Sasser the key to Houston's offense?
Yeah, he's a key. I mean, Alabama face guarded him the whole game and didn't help off. And, I thought that Houston might use him as a screener a little bit more, but they didn't in that particular game. Maybe they learned something from that and ways to attack it. But yeah, he's their best player and their most dynamic scorer. But they've got a number of areas they can go. I mean, the key to the team is probably Jamal Shed, their point guard, because he's incredibly tough-minded. He's quick. He's strong. So he's kind of the heart and soul of their team in a lot of ways. And Houston had everything to win that game at Alabama. I don't think they performed. Tremont Mark fouled out with several minutes to go, which was not helpful to Houston's cause. But that's a game they could have won. And I'm sure if you were in the Houston locker room, they felt like they should have won. You give great credit to Alabama, but Houston's legit. They're up there with the very top teams in the country, and with the way they defend and rebound, and that's why keeping them off the glass and not allowing them second shots is really important, because they get a lot. They can get a lot of offense off of missed shots, and usually Virginia's pretty good, sending all 5 guys to the defensive glass and not allowing a lot of second shots. So that's a lot of where the game's going to be decided, or plays like those.
I don't know if this is a factor or not, but they've only played one road game, and that was at Oregon, and they won by 10, I believe. Is that going to make any difference in this game? Because JPJ can be a hard place to play if you haven't been there before.
Yeah, I'm not one of those that feels like arenas are difficult to play in. I think it's the team you're playing against that makes it difficult. I've never heard a coach come into a home loss and say, well, the crowd just wasn't into it tonight. That's why we lost. Crowds usually reflect the play on the floor, and what makes it difficult to play against is, JPJ is a tough place to play because they make you play Virginia when you go there. There's nothing about the building that's particularly intimidating. It's the team you're playing against. But Houston has a ton of experienced players. They have a couple of young guys that are playing some minutes. Jarris Walker is primary among those. But they've been in difficult environments, and I don't think that'll be the deciding factor. Certainly, if Virginia doesn't play well, I don't think the crowd is gonna be a difference maker. I think it's more what Virginia does.
Kihei Clark's been one of my favorite players to watch. I just think he's fun guy to follow in a game. And a lot of coaches have raved about him this year. But some Virginia fans didn't want him to come back for a fifth year. And what are they missing? What do they don't get about Kihei Clark?
Well, I can't speak to that. That's a fan preference, and they can do what they want. Kihei is a winner. He's a very good defender. He gets up underneath you and is a pest. I mean, it makes it difficult for you just to bring the ball up. So when he's guarding you, you're spending time worrying about him instead of time worrying about running your offense or making the play you need to make. And so he's disrupting in that regard. And he's a good offensive player. If he's not leading the team in scoring, he's right there. I mean, I think Virginia has 4 guys that are averaging double figures are right there. He doesn't go off often for 20 plus, but he's capable of it. I've seen him do it. And he can shoot it when he's open. He's got a great handle. He's a very reliable ball handler, so doesn't turn it over, and he's a good passer. So he plays within Tony Bennett's system and does it really well. And to have a player that experience come back for another year, I think is a stroke of luck. I mean, it wasn't luck because he wanted to come back, and it's a great place for him to be. But he didn't have to come back, and so that was a stroke of good fortune, let's call it, for Virginia.
Yeah, well said. Jay, you've been just about everywhere, I guess, in your storied career, and you're still a pretty young guy. But do you have a favorite venue to call a game in?
Yeah, Kansas is my favorite. Allen Fieldhouse. I think it's the best arena in basketball. There's a history to it. I mean, that building has a soul. And so, from all the things that go into being a broadcaster, the environment is great. The broadcast position is great. You're not going to have a better place to view a game than Allen Fieldhouse.
That's cool. That's one of the places I still haven't covered a game yet. So I need to find a way to get out there.
Yeah, it's a bucket list.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jay, for your time. I really appreciate it, man. I know you're a busy guy, and we'll look forward to seeing you Saturday at JPJ.
Me too, Jerry. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. Take care.
You too.
Okay.